Part of character creation in any tabletop RPG that you're playing in is their backstory. You might already have an idea, loose or complete, or you'll work with a DM at your session 0 or as you play. Whenever it happens, there's varying degrees of a backstory, from an idea as mentioned, to pages of detailed notes, to a fully written out short story. This is one of my PC backstories, which all started with this mini. Going through my minis was a good place to start for a character idea, for my first time being a player in nearly a decade. Once I had the mini, it was clear I was a dwarf, and a fighter with a hammer. A gladiator background perhaps. I was thinking of making him old and a bit forgetful, of past rivalries and people he's met over the decades of a tournament scene. Plenty of opportunity for roleplay and humour. Maybe his name could be something related to his weapon. Then the next day, as I was making breakfast, it came to me. Hammer Fist. But people always mishear it as Amethyst. So basically, this all started from a pun. But why Fist? Well, because he comes from a dwarf clan of barbarian knuckle fighters, obviously. But he has a hammer, I hear and see you point at the mini. Well, that's because he was banished from his clan for using a weapon. Something gladiatorial maybe. A sickle could work. And now that's the weapon that got him banished. So now we have the cause that got him out of the clan, and leading him to be a gladiator to be eventually involved in a D&D campaign. But then once there was one clan of the Hammer Fist, that snowball really got going, with numerous clans, histories, emblems, wars, clan name rules. But that's not needed in this video. Neither is it in this short story. That's a whole separate PDF, or future video. This is about Amvodrigal Hammerfist and his backstory. Though his age did change from having 100+ years since his banishment to 10 years, so he's not really an old forgetful dwarf anymore. So, this backstory needed to have a clan, a fight where he used a weapon, a banishment, and a little extra bit of roleplay of having something to do with coins, so I could have my hobbit dwarf coins at the table. This is what I eventually got, and eventually would abandon for a different backstory for this dwarf with a hammer mini. I wrote it in first person. I don't know if this is normal for backstories, but that's how it came out. Let me know in the comments, first person or third. Now that you've got the context to why, we can begin with this narrated short story read by the dwarf himself. Along with this audiobookness is some AI generated art I've cooked up on Adobe Firefly to accompany the story being told. So here is a D&D character's backstory.
10 years ago, I received a letter, which arrived in a rather large scroll case, inviting me to partake in a tournament. It had the usual instructions and details, but one was different. Present the token to gain entry. Shaking it, a slight jostling could be heard at the bottom. Looking in, it was empty. On the unopened end, it had an embossed pattern with a gold band going around it. Twisting, it came loose, and inside, wrapped in fur, was a gold coin, blank, with edges around the side. On the day, and at the place notified in the letter, I presented the token and entered through a large gate that was indented into the stone wall that ran near a bridged overpass street. Being led through, I caught glimpses of others also being taken somewhere, downstairs and through corridors. I was eventually shown to a room with 2 wooden doors, one in and one out on the opposite side. A crowd could be heard outside, and their footsteps were shuffling and stamping above. Gear and weapons were laid out. I refused the weapons confidently. Suddenly, darkness filled the room, and then a bright white blinded me. The door seemingly disappeared as I stepped onto black stonework. Some were cracked with impacts and cut. The arena was many-sided, and there were no doors showing now, just wooden panels and iron girders. Tall walls closed it in, but the audience could still be seen in their rows above, through the sharp iron spikes that lined the rim. A half-elf with 2 sickles stood across from me. The fight was going well. I was punching at his arms as he was in mid-strike and dodging incoming blows, then uppercutting to try and knock him off balance. We were going blow for blow, both not showing our fatigue. In a brief respite, up in the audience I noticed money was changing hands. It seemed to be bets at first. It was all going to one spot, piling onto a large scale. Soon the scales dropped past a point, and the guillotine fell suddenly, cutting the scales. The bowl with the coins was tipped into a chest. A voice sang loudly above the roaring. "To the death, and to the victor goes the spoils." He came at me with 2 sickles. The first blade lunged in and cut my chest as I sidestepped. The swift follow-up strike was stopped by an uppercut to the elbow, and I finally broke it. While getting slashed by the other sickle in the shoulder, I grabbed the one hanging from his broken arm and swung it with my fist into his neck. The neck was not completely severed, and he grabbed at his throat as he stumbled to the ground. The crowd roared, and he coughed and struggled to get up. The crowd roared again, and they chanted, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" I looked at this half-elf stranger on his knees. If I had time, I may have wondered how he got here. Were our paths the same until now? Any question of hows and whys was drowned out by the demands of a crowd. And the answers to all of them was kill. I cut through the remainder of his neck. A drawbridge-like door fell into the pit, from what looked like any other side. It was drawn down quickly by unseen chains below the podium structure, revealing the chest, with the lid open and lowering down. Behind it was a corridor, and hopefully a way out. None of this was in the letter, no prize money, and certainly no to the death. I grabbed a handful out of the chest as I passed. Many fell through my bloodied fingers. What was left in my clasp I shoved in my pocket. I heard the announcer's voice booming from behind. "The generous victors left some spoils of battle for us," as the chest was taken out into the pit. The door closed behind me. Arcane glowing torches lit the dark passageway. I could hear footfalls following me from behind. Others came from other joining corridors. Up ahead, coming down the corridor, was a fresh breeze, and the air was lighter but colder. I went to reach down to my cloak, and found I still had the sickle held tightly in my hand. As I stared at it, a large-set guard came up from behind and laughed. "A souvenir there, dwarf. Ha! Well, I would say I didn't see anything for some of your prize money." Holding out a hand, I reached into my pocket and pinched a stack of bloodied gold and silver, and I gave it over. I unpinned and unfurled my cloak from my waist. I put it on, covering my face with its large hood. I picked up the sickle and quickly tied the hilt strap to my belt. I came to what seemed to be a dead end, but the breeze still came through. A gloved hand phased through towards me, palm upright. The guard behind me stood close by, and still. A floating hand turned face up and gestured, "Come this way." The guard confirmed this by pushing me towards it. Out I came, through the wall, into the last underarch of a bridge street above. 2 guards were on each side. It was barred and gated. They paced back and swapped sides. One led me out of the gate. I saw the other. Arches down the lane were just as inconspicuous. Some were barred up, blocking entries to the sewage hatches, and some were coal and wood furnaces to heat the buildings above. They each had secret entrances. I didn't stay around to see or ask. My wounds were hidden well enough under my cloak as I made my way through the streets to the upper levels. Heading towards the tavern with a bathhouse, rain began to fall and lightning lit the sky. I found a fancy-looking tavern, the Crystal Swan. Before I could enter, I went round to the side, where the roof was pouring down rainwater into the alleyway. I took my bloodied hands from under my cloak into the falling water, and lightning struck above me. I brought out the handful of coins and washed them too, taking a closer look now. They were not coinage I recognized, but the weight in silver and gold should suffice as payment. I haphazardly ripped strips of my cloak to ease the flow of blood long enough to get in. Coming in soaked, I strode with confident intent. I took out the gold pieces with my left hand, hiding my right arm beneath my cloak. Though not standard payment, I got room with a private bath. In the basin, I soaked the cuts and tended them as best I could. Better still, I had enough to stay a few days more for my wounds to start to heal enough before I travelled back home. I had already given a good reason to be gone for some time, so that wasn't an issue. I had some coins still to use, so I hired a coach to take me back at the end of the week. Going most of the journey back in comfort, the mere thought of a horse ride loosened my stitches. What followed that night was an uneasy, restless sleep. It faded in and out, one moment being engulfed in darkness, then doused in white light. Back to darkness, then flashes of red, with glimmers back to that night in the arena, bursting into my dreams. It wasn't long after I returned to the clan's hold that I was summoned to the chief's council. It was not for a welcome back. How was your journey? Once there, I found that summons to the High Council had been sent, with a reason not stated. I travelled with my father, the clan leader, Chief Anvil Undor Hammerfist, and my two eldest brothers, Anvakil and Anvadros, along with two representatives, for good measure, on what was clearly highly official proceedings. What aided my continued guise of being normal and unwounded was that it was still raining. It was coming down harsh enough for even my father to also don his cloak. It was a tense, quiet ride down. Later, in the council chambers, it all came to pass. Somehow, they knew about the tournament, and that it was won by means of a weapon. They determined it to be a dishonorable display. I protested, of course, out of turn for a High Council chamber, regardless of whether it hindered or helped. Honor. It was either that or getting killed myself, I interjected. One held his hand out at me and stood up. Some here on the council would agree that it would have been preferred. Nods and groans of agreement came from old dwarves around the chamber, murmuring through their grey beards. At that, and the look I gained from my father, I dared not speak again, and just listened. It wasn't much longer till a council leader, who'd not participated in procedures till now, raised his hand, then the room fell silent. Enough. Those are the charges against you. The clan leaders will be heard before your final hearing tomorrow at noon. For now you must leave. We have further issues to discuss that pertain to you. I order you to wait in the outer chamber hall, for today's proceedings are far from finished. He spoke down from his high seat on a dais. I bowed my head and turned to my father. He nodded, his stern face thus far unwavering. Waiting, it wasn't long after until my brother Amvadros, the second oldest, came out through the inner halls. He looked gravely at me. I knew not to interject this time. It's not boding well, brother. They are leaning heavily against you, he said, pacing in front of me. They've been waiting decades, centuries, for an example to be made. It had to be you to give it to them. Sure, there's been similar verdicts, an outcast clan hand, and some exiled clan Fist family members, but never a chief's son. His face sharpened, anger peeking through his grave face. This bodes ill for our clan as well. Beyond this, competition is not war, but it drives our people to action as if it were one, peacetime or not. The other clans will do close to anything to get the edge come the tournaments, and exiling eligible young middle chiefs is a sure way of weakening a rival clan. His pacing ceased. Anger washed away from his face, and he sighed. Forgive my words. They look beyond the importance of the present, and carry the same drive as those I just criticized. He stood still in front of me, rather surprised that I had been listening, I gathered. I got up. I trust you, Father and Underkill, to do what you will in my aid, but I agree that this does not bode well. I think you should return to it. I held out my arm, and we shook hands in our dwarvish fashion. Looking back, I know I gripped his arm tighter and held eye contact longer than any other time that we had shared one. For that was the last time I saw him as my brother. Once I was alone, I left. I left the outer chamber halls, the clan hold, and the city. I felt like I was being pursued the whole way back. Even in my own chambers, behind a locked door, I felt eyes on me. I gathered what I could, dry clothes and boots. A good amount of my rations had remained depleted from my previous week. It would need replenishing. But to do it here would be impossible without being noticed. I knew very little outside our clan lands, and what people knew of us was even less. I would have to disguise myself. I rolled up my sleeve and covered the only outward-facing trace of my clan tattoo. I wrapped my arm, from my forearm to my knuckles, with no mark of black peeking out through. I then took out my blood-stained cloak from my coffer, and furled it out over my bed, a diminished handful of coins and the token patted out, and shifted into a loose pile. The sickle was uncovered, no longer hidden. The council somehow knew about it. No time to think. Just you. You've caused this. You're coming with me, I told it, holding it up in front of my face and following the curve of the blade from point to hilt. It was then that I first noticed the sigil on the strap of a balanced scale. Again, no thinking. Do it, and do it now. This wasn't the first time that I had snuck out of the clan hold, though this time I deemed I would not have to consider sneaking back in. Hurriedly and to my knowledge, unseen, I came to the stables in the inner courtyard, and I left upon one of our horses, whose name escapes me. I rode out onto the open fields before rejoining the road when, out of sight of the walls, the storm assisted in veiling my flight, with the hooves being lost in a cacophony of shrieking wind, approaching thunder booming and a downpour of drums roaring upon the ground. Along the ridgeway, carving around the waist of the valley, lightning struck the hilltops to my right, and the horse began to rear, nearly flinging me off. Its neighing was drowned out by thunder from right above us, but not just from the sky. It came from the hilltop, closer and gaining. Looking up, I saw the trees falling, the ground shifting, and birds fleeing, caught against the dark sky in flashes of lightning. Well, if a flash was enough to spook this horse, a flash flood, I was sure would have it keel over there and then. I was wrong. Instead of dying of terror, it bolted off the road, down the hill, away from the incoming doom, but in the same direction. Through the thickets and trees it galloped madly, branches going for my neck, arms and head, for a scratch or looking for a final blow. Spindly wooden fingers groped me in the dark, and my cloak was torn from me. My legs were lashed, whipped and cut. We came to the clearing of the trees. The sound of water was behind and yet in front. The grey night fell into a distant black. A crack of bone from underneath me split through the thunderous clamouring and sent my steed down to the ground and into the wall of a low, rocky outcrop. I was flung above it and over, falling. I wondered if it was in pain. That was certain. But was it for long? No. That was certain too. as great torrents of water burst above me, over a crest, and came from below me to catch my falling body in the flowing torrent. No, not for long, I thought. I saw sudden bright white, then darkness. With no sure sense of how much time had passed, I woke up, with the drenched clothes on my back and a sickle stabbing into my leg, still fastened to my belt at my side. I sat up, finding myself upon a rocky outcrop in a fork of the river. No signs of the devastation could be seen here. The sound of waterfall came to my ears. It sounded soothing in comparison to the night before. My eyes searched around, but the hills were different. How far had the night taken me? Should the night have taken more? So far defied as it seems. As fate has chosen to exile me and kill me one day, so I'll put it to you once more. I muttered to myself, and spoke out to any and all unknown or known forces of the world. I reached down for the last fingerful or so of coin I had left, finding less, as some, I guessed, were at the bottom of the riverbed, judging by the hole in my pouch. Although better there than at the bottom of another crooked guard's pockets. I felt around and took one out. There was a helmed warrior's head on one side, and an eagle on the other. Heads I live, tails I die, as you clearly intend. I shook the coin at the sky. I stood at the edge of the waterfall. I flipped the coin. Tails. So that was it. And Rodrigal Hammerfist was no more, and I stepped out into my fate. I can still remember the moment I hit the water, but a sudden feeling giving way to an indescribable weight, then darkness. Ever defiant it seemed, I burst out of the white foam in the pool below. "By the 13 for the Dund!" I shouted. Fate's bane in my language. I chose there, lying on the stony walls of the bank, no counsel, no coin, no gods. In that moment I chose self-exile, and life as I chose. Even so, out of morbid curiosity, I flipped the coin again. Tails. I told it, we'll see. I still felt like I had eyes on me, but I had no bearings. Once I was dried by the sun and wind, all that was left was to walk. I first covered my tracks as best I could, with what the forest and my knowledge could provide me with. Miles later, only revealing them once I came across an empty dirt road, joining faint civilization, where I allowed my feet to be mixed with other sets that were long trodden and them long gone. Some sets going the opposite way, with a courteous nod towards them as we passed. Along the road, sometimes I joined with fresh sets beside me as walking companions, and when a name was asked for, I gave the form of my once true name, a third of it. I am Ogrig. The road and present company led me to a small village, as the coming of another cold night approached, but I did not despair at that, for I now donned a long cloak, which was shoddily tied round my neck, with long tassels draping by my waist. A man with whom I shared some miles had given me his spare after seeing I had none, refusing silver in return. Lowering my hood as we came nearer, he led me past a number of modest dwellings that were spotted amongst the dirt lanes that led to the square. In the centre was a well, and up from that was another modest building, but grander than the rest, with a wooden board placed outside with the image of a pail of water, and in painted letters above it read, "The All's Well," which was dimly lit from the light from within. We parted ways as we entered, with a handshake. I sat alone at the end of the bench by the wall, and stretched out my feet towards the hearth. In the comfort of the common room, I twisted one of my coins around my fingers and pushed it against my palm, leaving a faded, many-sided indentation. Watching the blood return to it, a shadow passed in front of me and averted my attention. An old man stood looking at me. He was friendly to me and didn't pose a threat or ask any questions that would deem him one. After seeing my sickle resting beside me, he mainly wanted to know if there were dwarven farmers who harvested their own fields. He and his fellow farmers at the other end of a common area had deemed it not so, and grain and food supplies were brought in through trade. I confirmed to him that it was true, as they deemed it, but only when applied to mountain dwarves. He was trusting and a kind man. Farmer Crowley was his name, and he proposed to me the opportunity for more coin. If that is your last one, he said, as I looked down at my silver coin. He asked if I would aid him on his homestead during the harvest in a few weeks. He promised that in exchange for hard work, there would be food and lodgings, and when all was said and done, there would be payment in kind and coin. Farmer Crowley told me to think about it, and if my answer was yes, I would see him again at this spot tomorrow. I thought of where I came from, an elite clanfist family, where hard work was put into the body in combat, not to the sickle and hoe. That wasn't me any more. For that day I was Odrig. I stood up. Crowley, sir, I beckoned, and he turned back around. You will see me here tomorrow, and I bowed my head. I was and am forever grateful for him putting his trust in a stranger who had nothing but the clothes on his back, a silver coin, and a sickle he assumed I knew how to use. For these past 10 years I have been Odrig, helping the Crowleys on their farm and their homestead. Out of season, I travel the continent, partaking in gladiatorial tournaments, waiting till I find the balanced scale sigil, or anyone who knows. For, though I am now Odrig, I continue the search for whoever betrayed Amvodrigal Hammerfist of the Hammerfist clan.
I hope you enjoyed this audiobook backstory thing. Nice to give an abandoned PDF in a D&D folder some life and get to share it here. So thanks for watching, and if you like this video, give it a like, helps the channel out, and leave me a comment down below, let me know what you think. And of course, and as always, subscribe, and if you like what I'm doing here, if you like the channel, share it with any fellow hobbits, and I hope this has been quite cool. See you on the next one.
It's quite cool.